Alright, welcome friends. Here we are in Unit 5, and this time we're looking at Lesson 7, specifically the warm-up from Lesson 7, looking at describing translations. Follow along with me. I have my workbook ready and a Desmos screen open just to take a look at what this will appear at the end. Here we are learning about how all of these translations and transformations we've been looking at apply to all kinds of different graphs. It's not that we're limited to just polynomials or simple equations and functions. We can use it with everything. In this case, we're going to use it with a square root function, so a radical. We could also use it with rationals and exponentials and lots of other types of functions as well. So we're looking at how we can turn some things from words into function notation and what the actual expression is going to mean. So each of these is starting with this square root of x here. So if we take g of x and we translate it left 5 units, we are pretty familiar at this point that that would have a g of x plus 5. And if we're changing what's in the parentheses here from g of x to g of x plus 5, that just means we're also going to change it in our expression, that instead of just the square root of x, we're going to have the square root of x plus 5. So this would move it 5 units to the left. If we went an extra step there, and we not only moved it 5 units to the left, but then we also moved it down 3 units, we already see what that would look like in our expression, and it would look very much the same in our function notation. We would have g of x plus 5 in parentheses. Close those parentheses because we're done making the horizontal change, moving it left and right. And now we also want to tack on a minus 3 in order to move it down 3 units. Now our next one looks pretty different. It doesn't give us the expression in words and how we would say this, but it gives us the expression equation that we have, the square root of negative x, and that we have g of negative x. So what this is telling me is because the negative is happening within the parentheses with the x, we have a horizontal change going on because it's in with the x. So what was on the left is now changing to the right. What was on the right is changing to the left. We have this known as horizontal reflection, or we could also call that a reflection across the y-axis. Either one of those makes sense, and if you draw in that dashed line for a y-axis, it makes sense how we're flipping those two back and forth. And so our last one brings all of these three ideas together. We're going to translate it to the left, then we're going to translate it down 3 units, then we're going to reflect it horizontally and put the whole darn thing all together. So we're going to see all of these things mushed into a single function notation. G of negative x plus 5, close parentheses, minus 3. And we'd see that same idea all together under the radical symbol, negative x plus 5 under the radical, and then a minus 3 tacked on the end. Now order does matter here. The fact that we are translating it left 5 units first, then down 3 units, then reflecting it across the y-axis. Now I want to bring this home by looking at a Desmos screen. So if you'd look here with me or just follow along in my video. I have our original function here in red, and the one in blue follows those steps exactly. Its first step is that it takes this function in red and it moves it 5 units to the left here. Then it moves it 3 units down from there. And then it reflects it across the y-axis, bringing each of these points into a different place. So our starting point would move from this spot over to 5, negative 3. And so I mentioned that once we have all that done, it would end up looking like this in this order. But if order matters, I'm going to draw these same kind of steps if we had done them in a different order. Let's say we reflected it across the y-axis first. Let's say we did that reflection going on. Reflecting it across the y-axis first would put this graph looking like this. And then to move it 5 units to the left from there, would move it that direction like that. So it would take everything and move it this way. And then from there, moving that 3 units down, we would have a graph that's way over here. And so we'd have a very different looking graph if we had that. Again, that would be if we were doing something like having the square root of the opposite of x, and then thinking that we would have this, doing that flipping first, that negation, and then what would be, our plus 5 to move it to the left 5 units, and then down 3. So we can see how that would change very much what this would look like overall.